Have you ever looked at something and thought, there's no way that's going to work? That's what most aviation engineers and military generals said the first time they saw these planes. Some of them looked like toys, others resembled UFOs or rockets turned sideways. Most of them broke every rule in the flight manual, and yet they worked. This isn't just a list of weird aircraft, it's a celebration of imagination, of engineers who dared to dream beyond the blueprint, of pilots who strapped in despite knowing the odds were against them, of bold experiments that reshaped the sky. These 7 planes weren't supposed to fly, but they did, and every single one left behind a story that still echoes through the hangars of history. Let's dive into 7 experimental planes that shouldn't have worked, but did. Number 1. Vought V-173, the flying pancake. If you had walked onto a World War II runway and seen the Vought V-173, you might have thought it was a prank. It didn't look like a fighter. It looked like a giant silver pancake. There was no traditional fuselage, no tail. Just a flat disc, wide propellers, and a cockpit sticking out like a lump of syrup on top. But this strange machine had a purpose. The US Navy built it to test a radical idea: could a circular wing provide better lift and takeoff performance, especially from aircraft carriers? The designer, Charles Zimmerman, believed a flat, low-aspect wing could allow ultra-short takeoffs. The V-173 was his proof of concept. And despite all doubts, it worked. It could take off in less than 200 feet and land almost vertically. It had quite a low stall speed of around 40 miles per hour, making it one of the safest experimental aircraft ever tested. Though the war ended before the more advanced XF-5U could see combat, the flying pancake proved that sometimes flight isn't about following tradition, but rewriting it. Number 2. McDonnell XF-85 Goblin, the parasite fighter. Now, picture this. You're flying a massive B-36 bomber over enemy territory. Tucked away in your bomb bay is a mini jet fighter ready to drop out mid-flight to defend you. That was the concept behind the McDonnell XF-85 Goblin. Tiny, winged, no landing gear, designed to be stored and deployed from inside a bomber. It would launch, dogfight, then return and reattach itself using a retractable trapeze. Sounds clever, until you try it in real life. When the Goblin was released during tests, it flew just fine. Stable, nimble, and responsive. But reconnecting to the bomber? That was a nightmare. Turbulence, inaccuracy, visibility issues. Test pilot Ed Schock described trying to dock it as threading a needle in a hurricane. He once missed the hook entirely and had to bail out. Eventually, the US military abandoned the program. Aerial refueling and longer-range escorts became more practical. But the Goblin was a bold attempt at solving a very real problem. And for a short moment in aviation history, this tiny parasite fighter proved that the sky had more room for creativity than anyone thought. Number 3. NASA AD-1, the oblique wing aircraft. Let's shift from military madness to NASA's world of curiosity. In the late 1970s, a sleek, unassuming aircraft rolled out of NASA's test labs, the AD-1. But what made this little plane so wild wasn't what it looked like on the ground. It was what happened once it got into the air. Because halfway through its flight, the entire wing would rotate diagonally. This was the oblique wing concept. The wing remained perpendicular to the fuselage at low speeds for stability. But at high speeds, it would pivot up to 60 degrees like a door swinging in the wind. This reduced drag and promised massive gains in fuel efficiency. The idea was decades old, but no one had built it, until NASA did. And yes, it flew. The AD-1 completed 79 test flights. It didn't break apart. It didn't spiral out of control. It actually performed better than expected. Pilots reported control issues at higher pivot angles, but the plane proved that the oblique wing could work. Today, the AD-1 is more than a museum piece. It symbolizes pure experimentation. It asked a bizarre question and answered it in flight. Number 4. Northrop Grumman X-29, the jet with backward wings. Some aircraft just look wrong. The Northrop Grumman X-29 looked like it had been assembled backward. Its wings were swept forward, toward the nose instead of the tail. Why? because engineers wanted to test extreme agility. Forward-swept wings promised tighter turns and better lift distribution, but they also came with severe aerodynamic instability. Wings like these wanted to twist and tear themselves off mid-flight. So, how did the X-29 stay in the air? With help from technology. It was built using cutting-edge carbon composites to withstand the twisting forces and was controlled by a digital fly-by-wire system that made constant micro-adjustments 40 times a second to keep the plane stable. The result? A jet that flew like no other. The X-29 wasn't a fighter. It wasn't even a prototype for a future fleet. It was a testbed, a proof of concept. It showed what was possible when materials, science, software, and aerodynamic ambition came together. It didn't look right. It didn't behave like any jet before it. But in the air, the X-29 danced. Number 5. Horten Ho 229, the stealth flying wing. Now let's go back in time to Nazi Germany. In the race to outmatch Allied bombers, German engineers developed something so futuristic. It barely seemed real. And that was the Horten Ho 229, a sleek, jet-powered flying wing with no tail or fuselage and minimal drag. Built primarily of wood and composite materials, it was the world's first aircraft designed with stealth in mind. That was even before radar stealth was fully understood. The Ho 229 flew in 1944. The plan was to produce a fleet of them to intercept Allied bombers at high altitudes with blistering speed. But the war ended before mass production began. After the conflict, the US seized the remaining prototype. Years later, Northrop Grumman recreated a full-scale replica to test its radar signature and confirmed its massively reduced profile compared to other aircraft of its era. Though the Ho 229 was never weaponized, it changed the future. Its influence is seen in modern stealth bombers like the B-2 Spirit. This was one of the first real attempts to blend aerodynamic innovation with low observability. It shouldn't have worked, but it did, and it nearly changed history. Number 6. Convair XF-1 Pogo, the jet that landed. Tail first, built in the 1950s, this tail-sitting aircraft was meant to operate from any location. No runway was needed. It launched like a missile. Once airborne, it transitioned to horizontal flight like a regular plane. But landing was the hard part. The pilot had to hover the plane vertically, look backward using mirrors, and gently descend tail first onto the ground. Only a few test flights were conducted, mainly by the incredibly skilled James "Skeets" Coleman. While he succeeded, he admitted that the landing process was nerve-wracking every time. Eventually, the Navy scrapped the project. Helicopters and tilt-rotor aircraft were more practical. But the Pogo left a powerful legacy. It proved that VTOL jets weren't just possible, they were already happening. And though the design never saw service, it inspired generations of vertical flight solutions. Number 7. The Caspian Sea Monster, the Soviet Ekranoplan. It's time for the last one, and probably the most bizarre. During the Cold War, American satellites spotted something massive moving across the Caspian Sea. At first, analysts thought it was a ship, until it started flying. It was nicknamed the Caspian Sea Monster. Officially, it was the KM, a Soviet Ekranoplan, a massive ground effect vehicle that flew just meters above the water's surface using a cushion of air trapped beneath its wings. The Sea Monster was 300 feet long. It had 8 engines and could travel over 500 kilometers per hour, skimming over water while avoiding radar detection. It didn't need a runway. Waves didn't slow it. And it could carry enormous cargo or troops across vast distances. The Soviets believed it could redefine naval logistics and warfare, and for a time it did. The KM flew successfully for years. However, the project was eventually shelved after a crash in 1980 and budget constraints. Still, the Ekranoplan was real and terrifyingly effective. Despite barely flying, it remains one of the largest aircraft ever. The Caspian Sea Monster wasn't. It was bold, strange, and way ahead of its time. Every one of these planes broke a rule. They weren't supposed to fly, but they did. They soared, hovered, or skimmed oceans. Dared to ask what if. They realized that progress isn't born from playing. It's born from trying, feeling, rethinking, then trying again. They were questions answered in sweat and sky. Next time you look up at a perfectly streaming across the clouds, remember, beauty may have started flying pancake or a sea monster. Thanks for watching. If one of these blew your mind, which one in the comments. And stay tuned for more where aviation gets weird, wonderful, and airborne. Until next time, keep looking up.